Welcome to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast. This is episode 39?
Yeah.
39. Coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, which we have very nearly set on fire and burned everything down many times.
That's right.
So, we've been looking at
Burning everything down.
and how to build stone hinges. Those two things go together.
That's
I
right.
think. First you burn everything down, and then you build a Stonehenge.
Yeah. Well, if you build one first, you can burn everything down. And the Stonehenge will still be there.
That's right.
And then you can use it to rebuild everything.
That's true. So yeah, we actually we want to try to build our own kind of ancient astronomical observatory / calendar. I don't know what you would call it exactly. I mean, we're not going to be doing astronomy from it, but similar to a lot of the stone circle sites where they have these various alignments that you can kind of set up as the year goes past, and then you come up with things as you're building it, I guess is the kind of the idea. Like once you've got your initial setup, like, well, we're planning on doing this on the equinox, right?
Yeah.
So on the equinox, we're gonna go up to the top of this flat topped hill and like use the equinoctial sun to determine the exact geographical directions, like east, west, south, north, and from there
cardinal directions.
Yeah, the cardinal directions. Yeah, why couldn't I think of that word? So from there we can start building out the actual structure of the site. And you're thinking of doing a wood hinge, basically.
I mean,
start with a wood hinge. Everybody
start
does.
with wood hinge.
Yeah,
right. We've already got a bunch of badass cedar posts, which last a long time.
It's a lot easier to drill holes through cedar posts than granite.
Yeah, and easier to set them in the ground.
Yeah,
sturdily.
But they only last 100 years. It's unacceptable.
Yeah, I know. Eventually, we can build rock structures around them.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so easy things to do are you use it once you've got the initial thing set up. You can start marking the either the beginning of the weeks. So you get 52 marks across the year that give you a calendar, right? Like a kind of a yearly calendar, or you can do it every day and get a 365 day one, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Like they were one of the things I read, they were saying you come out every day, like every 7 days, and
so
mark the
once a week,
sunrise,
right?
or whatever. Yeah. So you wouldn't really end up. I mean, because once the sun starts tracking back, like if it's tracking north right now, it'll start tracking back south after the solstice.
Yeah.
So then it'll go back past the same ones.
But it makes a figure eight, so they're not in the same exact spot. The figure eight will appear as your initial line will have all these tick marks on it for the and they get farther apart as you get nearer to the middle. Mm-hmm. And then as you approach the outside of it, they get closer together. And then when it starts to come back, they're going to be
in different
places.
Okay,
yeah. And it's really hard for me to visualize this.
Yeah.
But it's like that figure eight. It's called an analemma. It's caused by the Earth's tilt up to the plane of the ecliptic.
But it won't. Would it be a figure eight if you're just looking at the sun on the horizon? It won't. It'll just be a straight line going back and forth.
Yeah, right. It just goes back and forth. But if you have to look at it kind of up in the sky
or like at noon or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can get it as a figure eight using a sun dagger technique, which is
yeah.
Right, that's how you see its initial figure eight. Like you get.
So the sun dagger is where you have a stone with a hole in it, or something with a hole in it, and the light that comes through at noon every day.
You mark that,
or every 7 days, you mark where the light shines on another. Pillar or whatever you have, a surface.
Yeah, and then you'll get the analemma, the figure eight of the sun.
Yeah, so we're looking at all these different possibilities, and the ridiculous thing is that in order to do it, really, so if we went up there on the equinox, and just had some some pillars, some logs.
Yeah.
And we stood them up and lined them up with the sunrise or the sunset, whichever. Then you have to in order to get north and south, you
got to turn exactly 90 degrees.
Exactly 90 degrees.
Yeah.
And how do you do that?
You get string, and I don't know.
Yeah,
whatever
you have to make the right. Like first so you'd have to mark the sunset and sunrise.
Yeah, to get your straight line
and get a straight line, and then you could do some geometry and end up with a 90-degree angle off of that. But it would be really hard because if you're let's say you have these things set like 50 feet away from you.
Yeah.
A piece of string doesn't really stay straight, especially not if there's any wind at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was just saying this piece of string because that's how the archaeologists are always showing. This is how they did, right angle corners. And they show this guy with a piece of string holding it in diagonal. And you're like, whatever, dude, come on.
Right. So this is we've laid out this orchard, and we were trying to make a grid of trees where all the trees are equidistant, 20 feet from each other in a grid. But the first rectangle we laid out was like
weird. Yeah, it was weird.
It was like 600 feet by 300 feet.
Yeah.
And so it's like, first of all, go find a 600-foot tape measure.
Yeah.
So you can't really do that. You have to.
And even if you could have one, they bend in the wind.
You're right. And they stretch.
Yeah.
Or you can get what they call a chain, which is not a chain. It's just a steel, like piece of steel
wire
tape,
cable.
Basically.
Okay. Yeah.
Flat steel.
Yeah.
So it doesn't stretch and it doesn't really blow in the wind very much. It's heavy.
Yeah.
So you can like pull out, 100 feet or whatever, and then stake that off, and then you have to move the tape and then pull. And hopefully you're pulling in a straight line to the first line you pull. And it was just fucking 600 feet by 300 feet. Try to make that perfect.
Right.
It's
as you get to each corner, you're like, okay, this corner is important. I got to make sure this is exactly 90 degrees. And we're also trying to match it to the fences that are around because we want the trees to look like they're parallel to the fence lines. Right. But the fence isn't exactly square either. It goes all over the place. But we chose this long stretch of fence that's straight. And we're like, okay, we're going to match it to that because we're looking at the future where we're going to be expanding this 600 by 300 foot square into an enormous orchard using the initial lines. And so we realize as we're doing it, like, this has to be perfect because if it's not, we may not see the error now, but like 4 years from now when we're planting trees way out there based on these same lines we're doing now, if we made errors, it's going to be really apparent, right? That little tiny, 1/5 of a degree off turns into like 14 feet way out there at the end. And you're like, shit. So we spent a lot of time trying to make it perfect. And we got pretty close because we had a transit.
Yeah. And then we fucked it up. But
we fucked it up relative to the fence. But if you can actually go on Google Earth. And Dad pointed this out to me. He's like, if you go on Google Earth and you look at that grid you guys laid out, because it's now, you can see it now. He's like, it's freaking perfect. It looks like it's freaking perfect. Like all the little dots, which are the trees, are like, it's just, it looks like a machine made it. And I'm like, yeah, but there's
serious problems.
Serious fuck ups in it. Yeah.
Especially like you get a tree and then you go to put it in the hole that you drilled, where you removed the stake that was in the perfect position and drilled some big hole. And then you put a tree in there and you try to get the trunk in the center of that hole.
Yeah. No. Or while you're drilling, you hit an enormous round rock down there, and it pushes the auger off to the side.
Right. So there's all these issues with that, and now we're thinking to the future about like building this little wood hinge, astronomical calendar thingy
way up there, so we can make the orchard right later on. Like now we'll know exactly where north is.
But it's like all of these problems that we've run into, even laying out, something a lot more simple like a grid.
Yeah.
In like down in the field where it's all flat and it's a lot of soil and you can most of the time drill pretty straight.
Yeah.
It's still very difficult to get it exact. And so and
it's not aligned to any kind of cardinal directions or anything.
Right.
We didn't care about that. We just wanted this square. Yeah.
Right. But imagining that we would have to do this, and we were using this transit, this basically
the transit's like a survey instrument. Yeah.
Yeah, surveying instrument.
You guys are driving down the highway. Do you see the dude standing there with the pole? Was that me or you?
I think
that was me.
I think that's you. Yeah.
Amateur
hour.
Damn it. Thought I was going snake bro.
So yeah, thinking of trying to lay this thing out, number one, without the modern technology of the transit is not easy, because even the first transit we were using was there was a circle on it that has the degrees on it, and so when you go to turn it 90 degrees, you're looking at you're looking through a clear plastic little flange thing that sticks out that has a mark on it, a hash mark that shows you what, and then it overlays a ring that has little hash marks on it for the degree. But if you're not directly over top of that clear piece of plastic on the hash mark, if you're to the right or to the left, you might be setting it on the wrong degree. So it was really hard to get exact. And then we got this badass one. It's like $2,000. And it has a digital readout and gives you a much more accurate angle. So if you shoot a line and then you turn 90 degrees, it's actually a degree and then divided into the
it's like 10 thousandths, right?
Yeah, the minutes and seconds.
Yeah.
It's divided into minutes and seconds. So you go 1 degree and then you have 60 minutes of that degree, and in each minute you have 60 seconds.
Oh, isn't there a decimal version where it's like 90.9999? Like no?
Well, not that. I don't know.
Maybe it is.
It's all in minutes and seconds.
All right.
But anyway, so you can get really accurate with this one. And it's got a laser that shoots down so you can be right over the spot that you have staked.
Yeah, and you have to level them perfectly. So like you're setting it up on the ground and it's got a tripod. And the first thing you have to do is use this bubble level on the top of it to make sure that its platform that it's making with the tripod is flat. And then you put the transit on the platform and screw it down. And then you've got these little tiny minute adjustments on there to actually... to really
level the actual instrument itself.
Instrument itself, and it has like 2 bubble levels on it. One that are perpendicular to each other, and you use those and you turn it and you adjust it until you've got it perfectly flat. And then you use the laser, which shoots straight down from the middle of it, will help you put it on the exact spot you want it on.
Right. So like thinking about laying this thing out, we're like, okay, if we go up there early in the morning before sunrise and we set it up in the spot we want to be the center.
Yeah.
Of our little observatory.
Like we drive a stake into the ground. Yeah.
Right. And we put the transit over it and you get the laser dot right in the center of that stake.
Yeah.
And then we wait for the sun to come up and we put on our cool glasses.
Our solar eclipse glasses.
And look through it. And then you're like, okay, well, just try to get in the middle of the sun. Right.
Yeah. You have to use the crosshairs in the viewfinder to put the.
Right. Get it in the middle of the sun. And then
that's easy.
From there, we can zero it out.
Yeah.
And then you can turn 90 degrees. You can turn 180 degrees, 270, whatever. And we can mark out basically the cardinal directions, and then we can divide them up and make a nice ring. And then you'd have to pull a tape, say 50 feet from your center stake, to put in your posts all the way around.
Yeah.
And it's like, we can do this in one day. We could lay out the stakes of, say, the cardinal directions and maybe, some other stakes or whatever. Stakes don't take long. But then you would have to remove one of those stakes or something to drill a hole.
To put a post in.
Yeah. And so you lose the exact measurement. So then after you get the post set, then you go and set up the transit again on the same spot, and then you have to set it, say, look at one of the other stakes that's still in the ground.
Yeah.
Turn 90 degrees after you calibrate it back at your post. And then one guy has to stand over there with a marker or something. And you're like, move it to the right there.
To get the post exactly in the middle. Yeah.
And then you can either we were thinking about cutting points onto the top of the post or drilling a hole through it.
Yeah.
But then it's like, if I drill a hole through it, how do I know I'm drilling straight away from the center? And it's just like, God. Yeah. So we're just in planning this thing that we're going to build, we're realizing how fucking difficult it would be to do this with butt flaps.
Yeah. And like tell them about the fucking place where they service where they service this transit.
So the transit itself is an instrument that has to be calibrated. So I took one in to San Antonio to get calibrated, and it hadn't been, in the construction industry, they do this like every year or more often.
Yeah.
If you're doing commercial construction, you have to have your instruments calibrated. So I took ours in to get calibrated, and it hadn't been calibrated in like 15 years or some shit.
Oh, the old one, yeah.
Yeah, the old one, Dad's.
They're like, what is this thing?
I go into the place and like they have this special room that's like completely, the slab is special poured. It's completely separated from the rest of the building, not touching the other slab of the rest of the building. And it's like that room is, they use all these like precision measurement tools and everything to make it perfectly flat and all this kind of shit. And then they have these massive steel things bolted down to the floor, and the surfaces on top at desk height or whatever are like machine flat. And those are measured with all these precision tools. And then they put your transit on top of that. And then they've got these scopes in there that are all fucking. So they use all of this instrumentation to calibrate your transit to make sure that it's true. And then that room has to be calibrated every so often. I don't know how often, but they have to get.
They have to make sure that it's still flat.
Right. And they have to, so that they can say that their like,
calibrations are within 10,000th of an inch.
Yeah, or whatever.
Accuracy, whatever their accuracy is. Yeah.
Otherwise, they can't operate as a business for commercial instruments to be calibrated. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like the level of
infrastructure
required in order to just have this fucking instrument is insane. And we're like, we're going to build the first thing is like, we're going to build this fucking wood hinge. So how do we do it? And then we start talking about, well, we can use the transit and blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, fucking, how did they do this back in the day?
How do you do it when you don't have this infrastructure, or you did have this infrastructure? And I mean, cause like that room, if we had a cataclysm, it wouldn't survive.
Right.
You know,
the room that they have to use to calibrate. Yeah.
All that steel would disappear into rust, and maybe some of the concrete, if it was like the badass aggregate that the ancients seemed to use, it's like a geopolymer, but we would just think it was a rock, you know, with a weird, maybe it's got some cut surfaces on it or whatever.
Yeah. But that's another thing that just thinking about all this and planning all this brings up is that like the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, the way it's laid out and how precise the angles are and how fucking huge it is. It's like, what, 13 acres or something?
Yeah, 13.8, almost 14 acres at the base.
So we laid out this first section of the orchard, and like after we had like mowed the field and got it all flat and everything, and we had our stakes and everything out there, Russ was like kind of figuring some shit out, and he's like, dude, this is not even a quarter of the fucking base of the Great Pyramid, what we just did. And it's fucking huge.
Yeah.
And we were struggling to make it square, even with an instrument that's calibrated with all of this insane shit.
Yeah. We have all this, we have thousands of people in enormous amounts of industry backing us up, like in the background, and it's still fucking hard. And we're like, how did they do this? And like, all we had to do to flatten our area was mow the grass. Like, and on Giza, they had to cut that fucking plateau flat. You know, it's like flat to within a quarter of an inch all the way across that.
That's what I'm saying. That is insane. I mean, that it's so when you're watching Ancient Aliens or whatever, and they've got some engineer on there, and he's like, well, I just don't know how. I mean, we couldn't even do this today. That's fucking real.
Yeah.
Like,
it's not hyperbole.
It's like, okay, so we could do it today. Technically, like we have the technology and the infrastructure and the skills and the tools to do that, but it's like it would be so like economically it's not feasible. It would take so much work to get within that quarter-inch tolerance.
Yeah, you would need
you would
need to be a Rockefeller or a Bilderberg or something. Like, you'd have to be somebody that just had the money that you could throw at it. And then of course when you went to your engineers and architects and you're like, this is what I want, they would be like, why do you want that?
And they might not even take the job.
Yeah,
right?
They're going to be like, that's too... And if you try to get it... The hardest thing really in a lot of these things is that the way that we would do it now is not the way that they did it then, obviously. Like if you told them, okay, for the granite pieces that are in the king and queen's chamber, you know, I want you to cut them to spec in the quarry and then transport them here without using major roads and shit like that, you know, and they'll be like, no, you know, we're not going to do that. Like, I was just going through Chris Dunn's thing where he did this with some engineers, with some granite cutting guys, when he asked them, like, so here's the Serapeum boxes, right? These these 70-ton boxes with the frickin' 30-ton lids or whatever that are perfectly, and they're cut like mirror polished on the inside from one piece of stone. And he was contacting all these different like top end internationally like renowned fricking stone cutting businesses and saying, here's the job. How would you do it? Could you do this? And if you could, how would you do it? And then, of course, could you do it like this? In other words, the way that they appeared to have done it in ancient times. And like they were like, well, first of all, no, we couldn't do it like that. Because with that one, it was actually the opposite. They cut it rough and actually transported it all the way to where it was going to be. And then inside those tunnels, fucking did the precision work somehow. Yeah. Because there's one actually en route in one of the tunnels, and it was just dropped in the tunnel there, and it's rough cut, and it was obviously on its way to one of the alcoves to be finished, but and the guy was like, no, like first of all, just to get a granite block of that size cut out of a quarry, just to get it cut out of the quarry, not moved anywhere, would cost like $400,000, right? And then you want to transport that 500 miles, it has to come 500 miles, because it was coming from the Aswan quarry or whatever. They're like, I don't even know what the transport. It would have to be specially transported because there's nothing that we have
in our infrastructure that would be able to
carry it. Yeah, you'd have to build a special vehicle, basically, like they did with. There was something I was watching where they constructed this enormous truck that had like 100 and something axles.
Yeah,
and it had this huge. It looked like a bridge that somebody had turned into a truck by putting wheels on the bottom of it, and then like in the very middle, there's this big giant rock. And it spent months driving to the place where it was going to go, like 5 miles away or whatever.
Right, and you'd have to clear out the highway in the area. And so this is another thing that I was thinking about. On one of the commercial jobs that I worked on, they were doing the base pad for a building, and I think it was going to be a like fairly tall building, not like a high rise, but multiple stories. And they had, brought in all of this base material, aggregate material, crushed stone, and had spread it out and had smoothed it out and leveled it as, I don't know what the tolerance was, but then they had to water it and then they rolled it and graded it out and everything and packed it and vibrator rollers and all this shit packing down this fucking, because we don't dig down to the bedrock before we build something here.
Right.
Right. We actually make a sort of malleable but fairly solid pad to put something on. So after they'd finished it, and it looked pretty nice, you're standing there and it's this big, long, flat, looks perfectly flat. Of course it's not. But this guy comes out and he has this weird machine. It's like he sets it down on the ground. It's a pretty heavy, bulky machine that has like a computer on it and all this shit. And it's testing the density. And so it's like giving it a tap or whatever, boom, and then it gives him this readout, and he starts writing some shit down, and then he moves it somewhere, and it does it again. So he has to go and check the density and the hardness of this surface that they made, and that has to pass. The engineers have designed the building or the structure that it needs to be this thick, and it needs to have a density of this before you can start building the structure on top.
Based on the weight that we're going to be putting onto it.
Right.
We want it to be stable, so it has to be like,
So thinking about transporting these massive, whatever they are, 200-ton or whatever they are, blocks down a road, and it's like, how many wheels do you have? Because every road that's built and engineered has the pad that they put down has a density and a thickness that's based on the traffic that's going to be on it, the weight tolerance.
Like the road that they carried the shuttle on, or they used to put the shuttle with the booster rockets and the external tank and everything all together standing up, and they put it on this enormous tracked vehicle and then just kind of drove it really slowly down this. They cleared it because it was a highway that was going both directions, but they cleared everybody out because one track's on one side of the highway and the other track's on the other side. And it was perfectly straight, and they drove it real slowly. It was like, I think it went like, 2 miles an hour at max or something like that. And it took it a week to get there, but they would transport that thing like that. And they had to go and actually rip up the entire highway initially and redo the pad because to hold the weight of this thing. So
and tracks are so like when you put things on wheels, the surface area of the wheel that's actually touching the ground
is like the size of your tongue.
It's not very big. So that they measure it in pounds per square inch. But when you put a track on something, there's so many more square inches, right?
Yeah.
So you can have a way heavier piece of equipment on a track that won't crush stuff. And so this thing is on these massive fucking tracks that cover both highways, and they still had to rebuild this shit.
Yeah, and the tracks are, if you look at the pictures, like the tracks are like dual, you know, so like there's 2 tracks for every track set.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like you see people standing next to them, they're like little dots, and there's these huge tracks, like there's one, you know, really long, and the wheels and the tracks are just enormous, like freaking 30-foot things or whatever. But yeah, it was a crazy.
I wonder how many tons is it carrying? I wonder.
I don't know. I know that they did it completely empty of fuel. Like they obviously didn't have. I mean, if that external tank would have been full, it would weigh a lot. But yeah, that whole thing was very fascinating. All the stuff that NASA did for the shuttle. Like I love the fact that the shuttle itself, and this is kind of getting off topic a bit, some of it a tangent, but the shuttle itself, it has wings, but it flies like a brick. Like that's one of the NASA pilots that flew it. He's like, this thing flies like a brick flies. It basically drops, it just falls.
Yeah.
And I think the glide, you know, the glide to fall ratio is something like 1:9, which is terrible, right? So for every 9 feet forward you glide, you fall 1 foot. You're not going to stay up in the air very long, right? But it's also really heavy, the shuttle itself, right? And it's coming in from orbital speeds. So the idea with the shuttle is that you when you come into re-entry, you know, they want to hit the atmosphere with the flat of the shuttle underneath, and they kind of try to burn off as much of their speed as possible.
Holy shit. 6 million pounds.
Wow.
2,721 metric tons.
That's badass.
The transporter statistics. It's 40 meters long, 131 feet.
Yeah.
The width is 114 feet or 35 meters.
That's badass. And so it was a 2-mile journey that it went on. Is that what it?
Oh,
Yeah.
it's gone.
Oh, that's how many miles it's traveled.
It's gone 1,243 miles since 1977. That's way slower than 2 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, okay, so that's pretty impressive. 2,721 metric tons.
with everything on it. Yeah, with the shuttle on there and the weight of the transport itself, all that shit all put together is 6 million tons or whatever.
Yeah,
or
so
6 million pounds.
what's like the biggest fucking block? What was it?
The biggest ones at Baalbek right now are like 16 to 1,800 tons, so close to 4 million pounds.
Yeah, so basically to move it, you need this machine.
Right. And I don't think, and because the blocks are so compact, there may not be a place on that machine where you could set it where it wouldn't start crushing stuff.
Yeah.
You know, because the shuttle is distributed.
Well, I'm just saying that you would need a machine
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that to move it. And then that thing just goes in a straight line on a flat surface.
There's no turning with this machine. If you started trying to turn, it would just roll up the highway underneath it.
Oh, shit. Oh, my God.
But yeah, so the shuttle, like, I found this fascinating. The shuttle, when they were trying to land it, right? So it comes in and it's coming in from orbital speeds, which is, you know, 20. I don't know. It's hauling ass when it's out there. It's going pretty quick, like I think 10,000 kilometers an hour or something like that. But when it comes in, they burn off a bunch of that speed. But then when it comes in for a landing, it's still going really freaking fast. Okay, so they made this enormously long runway for it. But the problem is that it's so heavy. Right, and it would land on the runway to impact, and the wheels are going, and like they'd turn on the brakes, and they'd put up the flaps, and they'd freaking shoot the forward jets, and it just wouldn't stop. It would just keep going. They couldn't stop it, right? And the wheels are like, when they hit the brakes, the wheels would just be like, the wheels would lock and slide on the runway material, right? So, in order to keep the shuttle from flying off the end of the runway after landing, somebody had the bright idea of like, well, we need to increase the friction. Right, and instead of having this smooth, flat concrete, so they went and they got they actually custom built this machine that basically had a bunch of like grinder blades, right? And they just put it down on the concrete and ran it across it and cut all these little grooves in it, right? All right next to each other, these long straight lines, and they did that all the way down the runway, and then the shuttle could land, and because of that, it was able to stop in time because it wouldn't slide, right? And they actually ended up doing that to every concrete highway in the United States, and it stopped highway deaths by it's like 80%. Like 80%,
oh my god,
yeah,
that's fucking. I remember those highways, like the concrete highways. That
it has all the grooves and and like because of those grooves, and this was done because of the space program that they had to figure out how to stop the shuttle from flying off the end of the runway. They stopped 80% of highway deaths.
Yeah,
like that kind of shit is. This is why we spend money in space, people.
Fuck yeah. Of course, not to mention Velcro, which has saved like 8 million fucking devices from falling to their deaths from your hand.
That's right. Made it really easy to strap on those soccer shoes.
Yeah.
I mean, like the medical advances that have come about just because of NASA. We'll talk about that. We can talk about some of that in the next segment because we got to take a break right here. But yeah, there's some interesting stuff that came out recently about the guy who spent the most amount of time in space.
Yes,
he came down. He came down as like a brilliant giant with like weird activated genes and Yeah, so we'll talk about that. We're gonna take a quick break here, and we'll come back after these.
I'm sure all of you are just totally impressed by the smooth tangents.
It's very smooth tangents.
Like we fucking started out with fucking archaeoastronomy basically, and ended up with NASA.
We're still in astronomy though. It's space.
Yeah, I know, but still,
there's stars in there somewhere. Snakes looking at stars.
So yeah, getting back to it, straight lines are really fucking hard. Right angles are even harder. And moving extremely heavy blocks, long distances, and standing them up perfectly on those straight lines and right angles is fucking impossible.
Yeah. I mean, like up to the giant blocks part, I was like, we could probably do it. But then you said that, and I'm like, no, just no.
Yeah. Welcome back, folks. Brothers of the Serpent podcast, second half of the first hour. I love this. How you brought in the road lines due to this trying to stop this fucking object coming out of space.
Yeah, this brick.
That's great.
We put wings on a brick and wheels on the bottom of it and said it should stop, and it didn't. But like another thing I love about the shuttle, like I know all this shuttle trivia because I get into arguments with people online about whether it's worth it spending money on space. Right. And like, first of all, we don't spend that money in space, people. I'm just going to say it gets spent here. Okay. Don't worry. We're not giving it to aliens. But like the ablative tiles on the shuttle, God, those things are amazing. They are a fucking amazing. The tiles on the bottom that protect it from the re-entry heat, you know.
Yeah. And the nose, right?
Yeah. They're called ablative. Like the way that they resist heat is by shedding material as they burn, right? But they're so efficient that like I've watched videos where they've got one of the big tiles there. It's a big white, and they've got this enormous like high-powered torch just, and people go up and like right behind the tile, and they can put their hand on it. It doesn't.
Oh my god!
And like every once in a while, you'll see a little piece of ash go. Like just
wow.
That's how much it ablates, and it's like just shedding all this heat with little tiny pieces of ash, and it just like lasts forever. And it's like the ablative abilities of the material of the tiles on the bottom of the shuttle were considered to be completely impossible until they built them, which is why space programs are badass, right? Like this is why they're awesome. Like I know that it's a government thing, and I'm not really big on government doing shit because the only things they're good at are killing people and blowing stuff up. But like. It doesn't matter. They put all these scientists and we're like, let's put people in space and get them back, right? Yeah. And when you're faced with that, it's not we're putting a robot in space and hopefully it'll work. If it doesn't work, it sucks. You spend a bunch of money, but nobody's dying, right?
Yeah.
But when you put people up there, it focuses your attention a lot more on like this has to fucking work. Yeah. You do not want to be the engineer that fucks something up that results in 6 astronauts dying, right?
Yes.
So. Like the advancements that they came up with, or that they contracted out to people. Like they go to Lockheed and they're like, hey, figure this out. We need to do this, and it's never been done. But like, here's what we got to do. Here's what we got to accomplish. Fucking figure it out. Here's millions of dollars, right? And then Lockheed would throw it into their skunk works, and their engineers down there would come up with a bunch of ideas, and they'd put it together, and then you have this technology that just didn't exist before because you needed to keep people in space alive, right? Almost all of the medical technology that is in use right now for geriatrics, for like old people, for keeping them alive and like putting them in hospitals and letting them go through surgeries, all of that shit, all those machines, including the MRI and the all the magnetic stuff, all that was developed by NASA to keep their astronauts alive and to keep track of their vitals and shit like that while they're in space. Like all that stuff.
That's badass.
Yeah. So like when people are like, it's a waste of money. No, it's not. Like it isn't a waste. It's the kind of pure research that always pays off in ways that you can't even predict, because there's just so many. And NASA, of course, being a kind of an NGO. It's weird. They're not a private organization, but they're not government either. It's a bunch of private scientists that aren't government employees, right? But the money's coming from the government, so it's a weird NGO thing. But NASA does this deal where they don't patent their stuff. They actually will just farm it out. Like all the things that they invent, they turn around to the companies that they've been working with and like, here, you take these and you guys take these and go.
That's freaking awesome.
And so like we have all these advancements that just show up in the private sector, like basically free of charge. The R&D has been paid for. So the companies that are now making these things that are based off the inventions can sell them cheap because they didn't spend billions of dollars in R&D on it. Right. It's the benefits to society as a whole are incalculable. Just from the Gemini, Apollo, and then shuttle programs. I mean, just fucking it's amazing. Yeah,
and so there's this whole new thing that's happening now, and I'm saying it's happening. It's like a new idea or this new discovery based on this astronaut that was up in space for over a year or whatever. He's now the longest.
Yeah, longest guy in space ever. Like he spent the longest continuous period in space. Like there's other people that have spent more time cumulative, but he was up there for almost, I think it was almost a complete year in space. Like he was in 0G in orbit on the ISS.
And he happens to have a twin brother.
Right. That's why they did this, because the twin thing was like specific for this. Like
identical twin.
You can tell that there are Nazis somewhere back there in the past. It's like weird, man. Like the Nazis were famous for experimenting on twins because of this same reason. Like you can tell there are Nazis in the past somewhere back here.
No.
Did I just ruin this for you? Sorry.
Yeah. So the guy comes back and he has different DNA. The telomeres. We were talking about telomeres a while back with Brett.
Yeah. Telomeres are like basically you think of them as like they're the thing that sort of calculates your age. You have this long string of things, of telomeres at the end of your DNA, and every time it replicates, the telomeres get shorter. So that gives you like a sort of a limited amount of times it can replicate perfectly, and then after that you start to degrade, right? Which is aging and dying. Basically, you start to die after that. So this guy comes back with increased telomeres. Like his telomere chains are longer after being in space.
So immediately I'm like, okay, you live forever in space.
Right. Like clearly you live forever. Like he was up there for a year and he added who knows how many years to his life. Right.
And so I was like thinking about the Anunnaki, that they supposedly lived ridiculous amounts of time, but then they come down here, and part of the story is that the ones that were here were like obviously aging and
compared to their brothers up in space.
The people that would come and see them after so many years, they're just like, oh my God, what fucking happened to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was one of the things they dealt with when they were here.
And the other thing that happened to this guy when he came back is he was 2 inches taller. And we're like, okay, so clearly the Anunnaki were giants, right? So this guy is like living longer. He's taller.
Right. Which goes back to like sort of the, Graham Hancock's sort of line of thinking that what if it wasn't aliens, but they were us, individuals from an advanced culture that was lost a long time ago, and they left Earth.
Some of them did, yeah.
Some of them left Earth and they colonized somewhere, or they found a place where they could live and survive, and they came back and
to see what was up. Yeah,
they're way bigger. Their DNA is different.
Yeah,
maybe it developed like.
But that would explain why they could mate with us and like.
Yeah.
You know, like why we're so similar. It's like they were us.
So that was another immediate thought that I had is like, what if that is the missing link in evolution? Like this idea of evolution is that really when you're down here in this gravity well, it's like it takes way too long. But if you're in space, it can happen a lot more rapidly.
You mean the evolution type stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the other thing that it said, like the first thing it said after mentioning the telomeres in this article about this guy, it said that he had like genes that were activated from his time in space. They were basically saying he had space genes that were activated. And I'm like, wait, that implies that we all have dormant space genes in us that will activate if we go to space and you stay there for long enough. Like that's crazy. How did those get there? Like if we evolved on this planet, why do we have fucking dormant space genes? Like,
so we need to send like a dog up there
to see if dog have space genes.
To see if they have space genes.
Yeah,
I mean, you were just talking in one of the previous podcasts about like dogs and cats falling from the sky and shit. You know, you were going on this stuff and I was skirp-terping it. But I mean, hey,
that's true. And we have sent dogs to space. Like, what's her name? Laika?
But I mean, leave them up there for like a year, you know?
Yeah.
With a twin.
Rovernauts.
They have like 8 twins down here.
Canaanauts. Canaanauts? Felinauts and Canaanauts. Right? And the Soviets did send a dog. I think her name was Laika. Laik.
I don't know, man.
Yeah, something like that. But they sent her up and they were like, you can, go dog, yet. And I think she survived. She like went up, orbited, came back down in reentry and got a bone or something. But yeah, it was famous Cosmodog. But yeah, that's a good point. But this is the thing, like we would need control animals that we know aren't domesticated too. Like you want to send something up there that, because it's very possible that if the dogs go up there and then they get space genes activated, it could be because they came with us from space. You know what I'm saying? So if we send up a couple of dogs and cats, and we send up like an emu or something that we know was never domesticated, or whatever, just anything that wasn't domesticated, and see if it has space genes that are activated.
Yeah, that's cool shit. So that's my original point was that this is another line of like study. Yeah. Now that's going, we don't know. We have no idea what the ultimate result of this line of research will be. Yeah. But
clearly it's a ploy from NASA. It's a big lie because we know we can't go to space because of the Van Allen belts and the radiation's deadly, and they're just trying to get more funding.
Fucking reptilians.
Reptilians.
But no, seriously, you were just talking about medical technology. Yeah. Like, what if I know there was some movie where the guy was like up in space, like orbiting.
Yeah,
Contact. I think it was Contact. Yeah, yeah. He's staying alive up there.
Yeah. So it was
staying alive.
That's right. Staying alive. It was and that was based on, at the time, known research. So like they've known that there's rejuvenative effects of staying in space. Like, dude.
But then I was reading something a while back that was talking about how, oh no, like once you stay in space too long, you're fucked.
Well, there is a possibility that you may become fucked if you stay in space too long and you don't take certain measures to keep yourself from being fucked. Yeah. In other words, like you're in zero G, so it's the same thing as being bedridden for years. Like your muscles will atrophy because they're not being used. So they may atrophy to the point to where you can't ever recover.
So you need to bring a Bowflex.
Giant.
Try the Bowflex.
Rubber bands.
You will become pumped.
Yeah. So they do that on the ISIS. You can see their exercise equipment where they basically stand on this. It's like a treadmill, but it has these enormous rubber bands that strap you down to it, and they're all running. But it's got the rubber bands holding you down.
Why don't they just take dumbbells? I mean, it's like way easier. Stop this dumbbell now.
It comes flying at you at like 2 inches an hour. And you're like, nope. Yep. Some terrifyingly slow accidents can happen in space. Like imagine if, like you're up there and you're trying to rob a space bank. Right?
Yeah, and then a Tesla like runs into you.
That's pretty slow than a space accident. But like you set off charges behind the space bank's safe, right? Which is full of space gold, right? So it weighs a shitload, but it's weightless because you're in space, and you set off these explosives, and and it blows it off the back wall, and it's inching towards you incredibly slowly. And you're like, okay, sweet. And you go and you're like trying to open the door and shit, and you turn around and it's still coming. You're like, all right, let's stop.
Yeah.
And you can't stop it because it has this enormous inertia. It's moving like incredibly slowly, but you can't stop it.
Yeah.
You know, like that's there's some weird stuff about space like that. Like, and then that brings me to the question, I probably shouldn't ask it, but like, what the hell is inertia anyway?
Yeah, shit. I don't
Tune in
know.
next week, folks, to find out the answer to that question from Elastic Universe.
It is really weird, though.
Yeah, that's no one knows why we have that.
But it seems like when you first think about it, it's like, yeah, it makes sense. But then when you really think about it, it doesn't make sense.
Well, yeah, it's like it makes sense because I have
because I've been dealing with it forever.
Right, because everything that I know tells me that that's how things work. But when you try to figure out, like, wait, what's the mechanism? Like, why do things work like that?
Yeah.
And can you turn it off? That's
Yeah,
really
that
the
would be
question.
cool.
Because with their, like we have particles that apparently do not seem to have any mass. Like the way they say it now is they don't interact with the Higgs boson. They don't interact with the Higgs field, so they don't have mass. When you don't have mass, you don't have inertia, right? Yeah. And that's why they think of it as a field. The whole Higgs field is supposed to be the cause of mass.
Yeah. I got the idea that it was it was originally what caused things to have mass, but it doesn't seem like something interacts with it once and then it just gains mass forever.
No,
it must still be interacting.
It's a constant
with it.
interaction. Yeah. The Higgs field is ever present. Like this is why they were looking for the Higgs particle, which is weird. It's like everything has mass, guys. Like that means the field is everywhere, but you have to build this enormous accelerator to find one of these particles. I don't know. Yeah. Like if it's
giant magnets.
Like, yeah, we all have. They just wanted to play with magnets. Basically, they just wanted to play with magnets. Just wanted to shoot that proton beam. I love looking at the specs for that machine. I mean, it's kind of silly, but I love the idea of of runaway beam. You've seen that? It's the LHC circle, and there's this long straight line going off of it, where they let the beam go if they're like losing control. And it's just a beam. It's not even really a beam of light. It's just a bunch of little packets of protons, right? Which are the positively charged heavy nuclei, atomic nuclei stuff.
Yeah.
So they're fat, heavy particles, and but they're positively charged, so they can use the magnets to bend them around in a circle around this. Yeah. But if they start losing control, like one of the magnets starts to fluctuate, they just let it go down this straight line, and they have all these weird baffles and shit, like all this material, like
big blocks of lead.
Right, but a bunch of couch cushions for it to run into, basically.
Yeah.
But it's like enormous blocks of lead.
And then somebody got the brilliant idea, like, hey, I know how I can stop this thing. And they got this machine, and they went and they carved all these lines in it. That'll slow it down before it gets to the end of the runway.
Put the brakes on this thing. Damn it. But yeah, you can look at a schematic of the baffles for catching the beam, and they were saying that it has the same the beam when it's at full acceleration, and remember, it's just it's just a bunch of packets of subatomic particles. That's all it is. But when it's at full acceleration, it has the same inertia and energy of like a 100-car train going fucking 90 miles an hour. Like, it's like what the fuck? Like, how did you get a bunch of little particles to have the same impact as a train?
Yeah,
as a river of metal, right? When it hits those baffles, like they say that they've got these all these pipes going out that go to the surface because the whole thing's underground, where all this dust and smoke comes out. It's like, and it impacts all those things and smashes them together, and causes like a minor earthquake. That's
engineers, man.
Yeah,
they it's classic. No matter what period you look at, they're like, all right, how can we get this thing going? And then at some point they're like, how do we stop this thing?
That's how you know you haven't gotten it going until you start trying to figure out how to stop it.
That's right.
That's right. And they're just like how do we take these really tiny things and really fucking get them going so that stopping them is an enormous problem?
Yeah.
I mean, what else do you know that accelerates 3 months for 3 months? There's nothing else on Earth where we're like, okay, hit the gas full speed, go for 3 months and just pedal to the metal for 3 months. And then you're going fast enough, you know? And it takes I think there's a 3-month cooling period before that because they have to go down there and do all this maintenance, and they all come out, they evacuate it, and they have to cool the magnets down to almost absolute zero. And then the beam, while they're cooling the LHC, the beam meanwhile is being accelerated in the smaller accelerators they've got because they've got a whole string of them. Yeah. From the first one that they built that's really tiny.
It starts getting hot, so they move to the next one.
Yeah, well, it reaches its energy limit, and then they've got a shunt that sends it to the next one that's bigger, and it goes around that, and accelerating it for a while, a couple of weeks in there, and then it shunts to the next biggest one, and it's like going around with that one. And then finally, when it gets into the LHC, it's already been accelerated by like 4 other accelerators when it gets in there, and then the LHC like runs on it for 3 months, and then it's going fast enough.
And then they're like, fuck.
Yeah, and then they're like,
how do we stop this?
How do we stop this?
That's fucking great.
Yeah, it's like a
how do you stop what? I don't know. We can't see it.
Yeah. How are you bending it into a circle? It's not really.
It's actually a straight line.
But there's magnets in there though, so just don't worry about it. And then of course the things that they're trying to look at are so tiny and short-lived that they have to build these ridiculous detectors, like the place where the beams converge, because they actually are accelerating 2 beams. One's going clockwise, and the other one's counterclockwise. And they have focal points where the beams, because they're separated from each other. The one going counterclockwise is not,
it's on its own path.
Yeah, but they have places where they're converged, and that's where the impact, because and they just cross each other right there, and you just hope that 2 of those photons are going to accidentally run into each other at those enormous accelerations. And around those convergence areas, they have these enormous, gigantic detectors that are the size of like, small office buildings. They're humongous things with all these different materials in there and all these different directions, so that when all these weird exotic particles come flying out of the impact, hopefully they'll run into something from one of those materials in the detector, right? Yeah. It goes through the lead and it goes through the mercury, but it runs into the fiberglass or whatever. So they just have all these different materials layered in there, hoping that one of them will interact with the particles that come out.
That's going to become a badass artifact one day.
Yeah. But if they'll find it and be like, what?
Yeah,
in the actual fuck.
Some like kook fringe guy was going to be like, I think this thing is an eyeball. He's like he's looking at the detector.
Yeah.
They're like, whatever.
Oh yeah. No, I think they use this to see the universe. Oh my God. Can you please get some evidence to back that up?
It's a fucking eyeball, man.
And that's interesting because that the main detector in the LHC is called the Alice. Through the looking glass. Down the rabbit hole.
That's cool.
Yeah. It also is an acronym that's really clever, but I can't remember what it is. Active looking. Inter. Very small. I don't know. How do we get on the LHC? Anyway, back to the Anunnaki astronaut guy. So after he came back to Earth and they found out that he was like taller and going to live a lot longer and he was way smarter, then he got dumb and short and he aged fast.
I thought that what they were saying was his brain activity was like really slow when he got back here.
Well, I think they were saying that he had higher cognitive abilities in space, but then when he came back here, the strain of readapting to gravity just caused him to be sluggish because it was like tiring as fuck. Like when you've been in 0G for a year, man.
Yeah, so you look at those like ancient carvings where the giant is just kind of lazily laying on the ground and he's got like one of the Adamu there and he's just like, go get me some grapes, Rich, now. I'm your god.
That's right. Wave those things at me and help me hold up my head. Yeah.
Yeah, you got the guys with the feathers, over there.
Like trying to cool them off because they're used to being in a spaceship with climate control.
Yep, and it makes sense, they had to come down here and mine gold and they were just like, no.
Yeah, this is too hard. Yeah. Working conditions are awful because there's gravity, not because of accident problems. It's just like things weigh stuff here.
Yeah.
Like I have to pick up this pickaxe and it actually is heavy. No.
Yeah.
Make some slaves. Make some slaves that are used to being here.
Yeah. So the weird thing about inertia, it's like in space,
It's not
you don't
heavy.
have to pick it up, but you have to deal with its inertia.
Right.
Like on Earth, it's like it's as though it's always accelerating in the wrong direction. You're like, no.
Yeah, towards your foot. Yeah, so it's
like accelerating out away, like up into the sky.
What?
Right? Like the direction of acceleration is like if you imagine the gravitational pull as acceleration, it would be accelerating the other way.
It's well,
Isn't that right?
no, I think it's accelerating towards the center of the planet.
So when
right?
you're sitting in a car and you hit the gas and you get shoved back against the seat.
oh, that's
you're
your
being
inertia fighting the acceleration.
Right, that's what I'm saying. The feeling that you have of being pushed against the seat is the same. There's no way to distinguish that from a gravitational field. So
Yeah.
the idea that everything's being pulled towards the center of the Earth, it's as though the center of the Earth is accelerating outward, and we're being stuck against it.
Yes, yeah.
That's what I was saying.
That's
It's like
right.
the acceleration is like
You could construe it as an acceleration of the object that
Right.
we're being pulled towards.
So when you go to pick up a pickaxe and it's hard, it's because the Earth is being accelerated out into space.
That's right. The Earth is actually running towards your pickaxe,
The fuck?
and so you have to pick it up faster than the Earth is coming towards it.
That's right. It's weird. All the time. But you're not moving.
Right, because you're standing on it. But it doesn't matter. Like if you imagine if you were standing on a quickly expanding bubble, right, where the outside of the bubble is just whoosh, inflating like crazy, then anything on its outer edges would tend to like stick to its surface as it expanded. And if you were standing on the surface too, you would feel that acceleration as a pull towards the center of the bubble.
Right.
And if you tried to pick up any of the stuff that was next to you, it would feel like there was gravity pulling it towards the center, but it was actually just the but that's not happening.
So you go to the fair. Yeah, well, it doesn't appear to be happening, but there's no way to distinguish it in physics, like the difference.
The difference, because they're both just like an acceleration in a direction. Yeah.
It's weird. Like if you go to the fair and you get in one of those little spinny things,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, the cyclotrons.
The inside, get in there and you start spinning around and you're like, that whole sensation, I mean, it feels like gravity. Like you just suddenly, you were standing, now you're laying down.
Right. Like it feels, I always remember this, like that, like it feels like the thing starts to tilt. Right?
Yeah.
I always thought, I would like get in there and I'm like, okay, well, ride this ride. And like, it feels like it tilts up to like a 45-degree angle. And you're looking, and the people that are across from you are now like up in the air.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, well, how come I'm never up in the air? Why are they always up in the air when this thing is supposed to be spinning? And then I get out and I watch the ride and it doesn't tilt when it's turning. And I'm like, wait, what's happening here?
Yeah.
And it's because your body, just your brain, interprets the acceleration away from the center of the cyclotron.
As though you're laying down on the ground.
As being gravity, as being gravity.
And then that's another weird thing is because you're on the inside of the spinning thing, now you're talking about angular momentum.
Right.
Causing this feeling of acceleration towards, which they call,
or just away from the center of the,
Yeah. But it's like a constant acceleration.
Yes.
Because of I don't know. It's fucking weird.
Yeah.
It's
It's constant, which is why your brain interprets it as being gravity, because it's constant. Like it's not like a car.
Right.
Right. Now I've been in cars that can accelerate really quickly, but it never looks like the front of the car suddenly tilts. It doesn't look like it doesn't feel like you're laying down because it's intermittent and it gets stronger
but in an airplane it does that to me when I'm taking off it starts to look like
the airplane's tilting way farther than it is. Yeah.
Right. It starts to look like everywhere in front of me is up.
Yeah, that's right. Up at an angle at least. But then
obviously the airplane starts tilting upward, but
not as much as it looks like it though.
It's like
and that's again because
weird.
it's a steady that acceleration is like whoosh, and pushes you back in the seat and then it kind of maintains it for a while.
Yeah.
And that's why like your brain starts to interpret it as like now okay, so gravity is no longer pulling me down into the seat, it's kind of pulling me this way. And so your brain says that's down. So that looks like everything up that way is up.
Yeah.
But if it's not, if it isn't really smooth and sort of continuous like that, your brain won't interpret it. Because like I said, if you're in a car, like even a motorcycle or ATV, like you hit that gas, it's like whir, and like it's serious acceleration, but your brain doesn't start to interpret things as
right.
It doesn't start to change the direction of gravity.
But when it's as powerful as like one of the cyclotron or whatever, when you could actually stand on the wall, and it's constant, you get that sensation.
Yes.
But this is just one of the things it's the fun for me to think about, because like learning that there's no way to distinguish the sensation or whatever of acceleration between that and gravity, and there's no way to really
and that's part
determine it in using physics at all. Like
right.
That's
part of relativity too. Like
right. That's what's fun to think about, is like trying to apply our ideas of acceleration to what's going on with gravity, and trying to imagine it that way is just like fun. Like there's got to be something there. There's something.
So once you realize that it's indistinguishable from these other various ways of looking at it, then you say, so what if it is actually happening that way? What would that look like?
So it's like a clue into the force, like whatever that force is, and it's tied to inertia. In some strange way. There's something connected there that is a mystery, but that way of thinking about it seems to be there's a clue there, something like that.
I see what you're saying. That's maybe not so much as a clue as there's an in. Right? This is where you put the key or whatever.
It's
like
hard to think about.
This is the first tile on the puzzle box that you can move. We finally found it. Now we can start doing the puzzle. We were talking about this. I know we got to take a break, but we were talking about this a couple of days ago with respect to Elastic Universe and how there might be these other forces, right? And which one were we talking about specifically that we were saying there's this other spectra that was causing some other kind of force? What was it we were talking about?
I know. I can't remember which.
Oh, it was the tachyon thing. Like so. We've talked about Elastic Universe and how there's this all-pervading medium of some sort that we call the ether, right? And it propagates waves through it that are, some of them are universal in size, and they are affecting enormous structures across wide spaces. But then they also get down to like smaller structures, or in the middle, the non-micro, non-macro structures like us, like in our planet, to cause gravity, right? But we were looking at this possibility of light speed being a barrier rather than a limit,
right?
Because the math works the same. So anything that starts out going faster than the speed of light cannot slow down to it or below it, and anything that's not going as fast as the speed of light or whatever cannot accelerate up to it or above it. So it's sort of a barrier, which makes a lot more sense in terms of it, in terms of everything being a function of frequency and waves.
Yeah.
Right? Because people will be like, well, how is it a barrier? Well, if there's something weird happening right there at light speed and it's frequency based, then that can definitely work as a barrier. And then anything that's perfectly within it never leaves it, and it always is going light speed, right?
Yeah. So the way I was thinking about it is that the stuff that we notice that's going light speed are the waves and the frequencies in the medium, whatever it is, that has the properties that make that it's the speed that waves are propagated in it.
Yeah.
So looking at tachyons and these other things that don't do that, they're actually traveling in a different one, a different medium altogether. And so these two mediums can be
they're overlapping, but
they permeate each other, just like we have the medium of air for sound, but light can also pass through it because that medium goes all through the air as well.
Yeah.
So light is traveling through it, but sound travels through the air, and sound, you can't, like, if you try to raise the frequency of sound to a certain point, it will no longer travel through the air.
Right.
Even though its speed remains the same the whole time.
Because its wavelengths become smaller than
the particles.
The chunks that make up the air,
Right. And so if you kept increasing, like say you had a tone generator, or an oscillator or whatever, that you could create a vibration that would propagate through the air. And as you raise the frequency, keep raising the frequency. Once that frequency wavelength gets too small for air molecules to be compressed and rarefied, it will no longer propagate a wave in the medium of air. But if you keep on going up and keep on going up, eventually you could get into the electromagnetic spectrum where it will start propagating a wave
of light.
And so that wave will travel at 186,000 miles per second or whatever the fuck.
Because the medium that's the
properties of the medium.
Yeah.
And so that works for a certain range, right? There's a spectrum that works there, and you keep going up, and my imagination is you keep going up or down right? You're going to go outside of it and go into something else.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
what if gravity waves or what gravity is, the force of gravity, could be a vibration that's
not
far lower or far higher.
Yeah.
And outside of that medium.
Right. And so, and the reason we were talking about this is because on that website, Mind the Hive, which is badass, they had this massive infographic that was basically say, here are the problems with gravity, right? Just some basic, very basic, totally kind of ignored, not answered problems with gravity. And one of them, the major one is that scientists have to assume that it acts almost instantaneously on objects that are incredibly distant from the thing that is supposedly putting the gravity out, right? So you have this big black hole, and it's apparently acting on this galactic cluster that's millions of light years away, right? But if light speed is the limit, then gravity should only be traveling at light speed as well, which means that there should be this enormous delay.
Yeah, a lag in the movements of the structures, right?
But there's not. They appear
you can't. This gravity, this galactic cluster can't be moving according to
where the thing is
the
now.
Gravity field of the black hole, where it is now.
Right, but it does.
And if it was billions and billions of light years away, it could move for billions and billions of years before the gravity of that black hole where it was then would begin to act on it, and vice versa.
So there should be these enormous delays in the act of gravity across from one body to the next, and there isn't that. There's and they've had to. It isn't observed that way. In other words, what's observed is there's an instantaneous, or at least near instantaneous interaction with gravity across these enormous distances, and so scientists have kind of ignored that and said they've gone with it, like they model everything that way, but they've kind of ignored the problem that like light speed is supposed to be the limit.
And then we've detected gravitational waves, what they call gravitational waves, but they're not gravity. It's not like.
It doesn't necessarily whip you towards those black holes that were collapsing or whatever.
They're called gravitational waves, and they do move at light speed.
And they're,
So we were discussing, like, well, what if these are some secondary effect of
some enormous
gravity? Basically, whatever's happening when these two black holes collide.
Yeah.
There's a wave propagated that has a signature, right? That wave propagated in this medium that light moves in.
Yeah.
And it has a signature that makes it, it's identifiable to that occurrence.
Yes.
But it isn't the actual gravity itself.
Right. The waves were caused probably by the gravitational fluctuation of the merging of the black holes,
right.
But the waves themselves are not gravity.
It's just like, it's as simple as like, you clap your hands. The sound that you hear is not your hands clapping.
Yeah.
That is the wave propagated by the impact.
Yeah.
Right?
Like of
the two objects.
The other thing you were saying was like you hit a bell or a piece of steel or whatever with a hammer and you hear this ringing noise. Well, the steel itself is vibrating from the impact, but the vibration is being picked up by the air that's around it and turned into this ring that then like flies out to everybody's ears, right? So that ring is like a product of many things that have to interact with each other before it gets to your ears. Like the steel itself is probably not making that sound. It's not. It's like, that's the sound that the air is propagating because it's being whacked by the steel as it vibrates. Right. Yeah. So that's probably what gravity waves are. And that's probably why they move at light speed, because light speed or light itself is a medium and a spectrum that we're familiar with, and we know how to look for it. So they're looking for gravity waves in the light spectrum, completely ignoring the fact that when they're looking at enormous structures out there, they see gravity acting instantaneously across these enormous distances.
That also made me ask the question, well, maybe, or the question is this dark matter that they're detecting perhaps part of that problem?
Oh, like this is ancient gravity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that all of this stuff, this 90% of whatever gravitational fields they're detecting is where everything used to be.
Right. It's the shadows of the stuff. Shadows of everything.
Shadows of the stars.
Wait. Wait a minute. Wait, shadows of the stars can't have shadows.
All right, we got to take another break.
Yep.
Snake break.
Snake stars and shadows. our pyramids tied behind our backs just to make it square.
Which we couldn't do.
This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and the second hour, first segment of the second hour, reading and laughing at all audience expectations every day. That's right. Just quality podcast here, folks.
Damn right.
That's right. So the burn papers.
Yeah.
It's like, you got some? Want to roll the joint?
Shit. You want to do that?
I need some burn paper, bro. Come on. Yeah. So the
last time I did that, I ran from everything and tried to go to sleep scared.
I ran and 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 I reckon I ran.
I ran far, far from this Burning Man.
Hey, that's a great Burning Man song. So the climate, or the Comet Research Group.
Yeah.
Not climate. God.
Yeah, ancient climate research group.
So the Comet Research Group, the guys that are basically the proponents of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Their last paper was published in 2014, I think. It was the one that was on the where they basically kind of outlined the bare bones map of the
impact proxies.
Yeah, the impacts proxies. So like basically shows this like what do they call it? It's a
what are you talking about?
It's a scatter map where they show you basically like here's where stuff landed after the fucking thing hit.
Okay.
Right. And basically you've got this enormous area of the planet where stuff landed, basically after the impacts. And this is where they started to see it as being a bombardment rather than a single impact or whatever, because they would find these sort of localized sets of impact proxies they were all the same. They're like the melt glass and the trinitite and the nanodiamonds and everything like that, but they all had these very slightly different properties that implied that different impactors were happening that had different compositions, right?
But they were all in the YDB layer.
All of them were in the YDB layer. Yeah. So this new paper they released, and like there's all this skirp derping that happens after that, because there's a bunch of people that don't like the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, and there's a lot of people, well, not a lot, but there are some that seem to be the most vocal opposition to this theory is strangely connected to climate change in some way, and also to the
I don't find it strange at all, but
well, yeah, it shouldn't be strange once you look at it, but it's weird at first. You're like, what? What do that have to do with anything? But yeah, obviously the connections become clear, and they're also connected with the whole. These are the same people that push the what do they call it? The human over hunting hypothesis.
Right.
That somehow these tiny bands of hunter-gatherers like wiped out 150 million mammoths in like a single generation.
Right, and they're also part of the, like, we're entering the next mass.
Yeah, the sixth great extinction event caused solely by man.
Right.
So those people are very vocal in opposition to this Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, and I think the reasons are obvious. They don't want, because if this is true, if the impact hypothesis is true, the scale of changes that happen to the Earth in very short amount of time is so drastic that it makes anything that we might be doing to the planet or not just kind of disappear in comparison. Yeah, like it just doesn't even matter. Like we could like drop nuclear bombs everywhere and just completely fuck up the whole surface of the Earth, and one comet will completely reset everything.
Yeah.
It flips over all the freaking layers. It reburies everything. It like washes everything with water and shit multiple times. And then after that, it's like you have mud flats, and then stuff starts to grow. It's like,
and we can mine all of our coal and use all of the oil, and one comet will just freaking
replenish
make massive new coal beds and all kinds of shit.
Exactly. So it really is and it'll erase all of our strip mines and any pollution, because there is pollution that humans make that's bad. I don't agree with. Like, I don't want fucking horrible smog, right?
We need to be
good stewards.
Like, yeah.
But CO2 is not a problem, basically. This is what it comes down to. But like, yeah, and we do need things like copper, and we do need things like like the various rare earth elements that you have to mine by using these really nasty processes with acids and shit like that.
But it's even like on the smallest scale, like we work outdoors, and we develop land, and you bring a big dozer in an area and you tear down some trees and all this kind of shit.
And it
flips over all these rocks and makes this big mess. Afterwards, you want to go in there and you want to try to set everything right as best you can and make it beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to leave it all just fucked up.
Right. But if you did, 10 years from now, no one would be able to tell.
Right. It's but the point is that even in on this really small scale, we try to clean up after ourselves.
Right. We believe
that's a good thing to do.
Absolutely. Like, and like, you know, if you just on like, again, on our small scale, we're not interested in spilling enormous amounts of diesel fuel into the ground, you know, even by accident. You don't want to do that. You try to clean that shit up if it happens, and you dig it out of there, and you just don't, you be a good steward. But in the grand scheme of things, nothing that we can do to this planet is going to, first of all, have as great an impact as anything like coming from space. And second of all, is going to impact it so much that anything coming from space is not going to totally erase it, like when it happens, you know. And you can see that kind of just by looking around at geology. You see these enormous, like geological forms that obviously took like enormous amounts of energy and force to cause. And you're like, okay, anything that was here before that stuff happened is fucking gone. Like it just, it's erased, you know. And the I remember when I was reading Velikovsky, he would talk about the problem of finding entire huge sets of strata completely flipped over, where the youngest stuff was at the very bottom. You know, and like this was a big problem in geology for a while. Like it's not so much now because people understand that we do get hit by cosmic objects. Yeah, and that can an entire, you know, a whole huge, like 100 square kilometers of area can completely flip over. All that strata can just get flipped up completely over, and you see it in Australia where there's like stuff that's been turned like all this sediment has been turned 90 degrees. It's down in Peru. It's like that. You know, there's one where it's like this crazy wall. It's like looks like it's a cliff wall. It's flat rock, but it's got dinosaur tracks running down it. Like the dinosaur was fucking Spider-Man or something, right?
Snake Man. Snake Bird Man.
Like these huge like theropod prints like running along this wall that's tilted it up at 70 degrees, you know? It's like, so that was obviously flat at some point, and something enormous happened that tilted that thing, you know?
Yeah, and right before it tilted, there was this dinosaur going, fuck!
If I run really fast, the curve of the Earth will keep me stuck to this. Wait, that doesn't work. Anyway.
No, right before it tilted, I mean, he's getting the fuck out of there.
No, it's like tilting up, and he's like... So, the Burn Papers is the next installment of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis research from the Comet research group, and they basically went looking in lakes now, because they've done ice cores and they've done all these land samples. Now they went looking in lakes all over there's a map that shows all the lakes they did. I think it's over 170 different lakes that they got basically lake bed samples from. So you send down these things and you get a core sample of lake bed material because it'll be stratified. Right, with obviously the newest sludge and stuff on the very top, but as you go down deeper, it becomes more compacted and more dense, and it's very stratified. And like the strata are excellent sort of, like in the same way that tree rings do this, or ice cores do this. They sort of preserve the state of the atmosphere of the year that that strata was made in. So the lake catches things out of the atmosphere because the stuff is landing in the water all the time and sort of sinking to the bottom of the lake and becoming part of the strata for that year. Okay, so like when there's enormous changes happening on the surface, it's being caught by the water of the lake and then being embedded into the lake bed. So they went and did all these core samples in like over 170 lakes across the world and found a common layer in all these lakes that contained, again, impact proxies, right? And it was the same, that they coincided with the same date as the Younger Dryas impact that they're talking about, like 12,000 years ago. But was really fascinating is the amount of coal that they were finding in these layers, these coinciding layers. And they were actually, there's some pictures in the abstract of the melt glass. So they had found melt glass in the strata of the lake beds, and they'd cut them open, and then on the inside of the melt glass, there are these little tiny shards of charcoal cinders, basically caught in the melted glass. The type of material that's making this melt glass has a melting temperature of 1,200 degrees Celsius. It's really fucking hot. Like no known wildfire or kiln or forge or anything gets this hot. It's too hot for that. It's like this is impact temperatures. You can't cause it by any other known natural. Maybe lightning strikes can briefly get that, but you can't get all these cinders and everything.
But this, in order for this, all of the stuff that they found to be everywhere that it is, it would have to have been a global lightning storm on a fucking
lightning bolt from the sun.
I mean, it would have just had to be, the shit would have had to be striking all over the fucking place, burning everything everywhere all over the world.
Right, because there's these melt glass spherules, just like there's billions of them in the lake beds all over the place. So, and they contain these little tiny cinders of like.
Yeah.
Which
and
implies,
by the way, just real quick, the Comet Research Group is 63 scientists from 55 different universities in 16 different countries.
Yeah, and they're all none of these guys are fringe or alternative. They're all very mainstream, highly accredited, very respected, but kind of hated right now scientists. Actually, they're being hated less and less. Their hypothesis is becoming more and more accepted. There's still holdouts and stuff, but there are people. Even I've seen recently, even some like pretty hardcore skeptical people are like, this is looking more and more like this is going to become the dominant.
The problem with this stage is like this is like one of the things you talked about, how they with the Olmecs. They saved up all this shit and then just dumped it on them all at once.
Right, yeah.
Because
so it's like irrefutable.
With Brett's is
Harlan Brett's,
Cataclysm idea or Great Flood idea.
Yeah.
He had all this data, and it was like once it got to a point to where people were having to seriously take a look at it, that process took so long that they slowly just kind of like spread it out into these like multiple floods over really long periods of time.
Yeah.
So
they watered it down, basically. No pun intended.
That's a good one. So it's like at the stage right now where you're having the hardcore opposition is starting to realize that it's going to have to take a serious look.
Yeah.
The problem is that the implications of this, if it turns out to be like, okay, yeah, this happened.
Yeah.
They got to change a lot of shit. A lot.
Yeah, everything.
A lot of shit.
Not only does it totally change, it's going to have to change a lot of things in geology just by itself, because the implications of this catastrophic event that's global in scope is something that uniformitarians have been insisting does not happen. Like, there are no global cataclysmic events that, to where basically you end up having vast climactic events that affect the entire planet in a observable way. Well, that's what they're finding.
In an extremely rapid.
And it's also extremely rapid.
And so
you have these enormous depositions or humongous changes in surface strata and things like that happen in a matter of days or even hours sometimes. They're called there's a word for it. Isochron. There's a word for it where it's basically like this thing is unprecedented and it happened very quickly. Like a good analogy is like the uniformitarianism is like most of your life. You go around and you're doing things and your body is changing, but the changes are all very slow and gradual, and it's just called aging. But one day you're riding your bicycle and you fucking hit a rock and you fall off and you break 2 arms and a leg and a rib and a fucking, and that's catastrophic, right? Yeah. That changes your whole life after that. Your body map is vastly different. The bones heal and everything like that, but it takes a while and you kind of hobble from then on or whatever. Like you're forever changed by this catastrophic event that took place in seconds. Yeah. And it had more change in it than anything in the previous 10 years. Right? That happened to your body. So this is a similar thing. Like you have these long periods where the change is uniformitarian and gradual, and it is one drop of water or 1 grain of sand at a time. But then these cataclysmic events happen where the amount of shift and change geologically that takes place within hours is equivalent to what millions of years of uniformitarianism could not do. Right.
Because so this poses a huge problem for the theory of evolution.
Yes.
This poses a huge problem for the idea that it was hunter-gatherers that caused the mass extinction of the mammoths and the
right, because
the Pleistocene megafauna.
Yeah.
This poses a huge problem for the archaeological record in that, we have this uniformitarian type of development where we start out as not advanced at all and slowly, gradually we become more and more and more badass butt flaps. Like that causes a problem for that. It causes a problem for this idea that with the global warming and the climate change situation, that everything is normal. And then we showed up with our industrial revolution
and started fucking up the normal.
Fucking up the normal gradually, and it's accumulating, and that's going to have like massive catastrophic changes, which don't actually happen,
right?
Unless we're here,
right.
That it fucks that all up. I mean, it's this is going to cause if it
becomes accepted and part of the mainstream dialogue, they're going to have to change everything. Like it's going to change the entirety of what's considered human history. Is not just be rewritten. It has to be completely re-looked at. It has
reevaluated.
Reevaluated entirely because.
And there are people on the cutting edge of this already. That are hated. They're like Graham Hancock is not a scientist, but he's a journalist, and he looks at other people's work, right? And he's forming these ideas. He's looking for a possible way things could have been or could have gone, that and bringing in all this data. And this is one of the big things that he's been looking at. Yeah. And he's hated.
Yeah. And one of the, like Carlson says this, that one, Randall Carlson, who's a geologist, he's an architect and builder by trade, but he studied geology. Yeah. He studied geology in college. He never did his PhD, but he's been offered. Now at this point, like one of his old professors has looked at his work on the scablands, the channeled scablands, and the things that he thinks that happened up there, and she has offered like, hey, if you write this up, I'll sponsor you for your doctorate.
Oh, that's badass.
Yeah, and he's like, I don't know if I really want that, But anyway, he says that Mavericks look at the data that the mainstream ignores. Right, and once there's enough of that accumulated, you get more and more Mavericks because more and more people are looking like, wait a minute, what about all this shit?
Yeah,
like Fort was one of those guys. The Book of the Damned. The damned are these ignored facts. That's why I call them. They're the damned.
It's going to reopen the Michael Cremo stuff in Forbidden Archaeology. Like, that's all going to be back on the table.
Right, and I think that. Because Michael Cremo has very weird things that, using the uniformitarian thing, appears to put humans, like modern style humans, at 350 million years ago, and I'm just like, I find
under massive freaking
mountains and shit like that.
Right. Their skeletons are underneath mountains.
Right, and in the uniformitarian idea, that mountain is 50 million, 150 million years old or whatever. So like.
But it's not necessarily that, like a lot of the things that the way they date. Okay, so you find a skeleton in a riverbed under a mountain. The modern way of dating
is based on
based on stratigraphy.
Yeah, stratigraphy deposition, which
based
they think
on uniformitarianism. Yeah. So it's like that skeleton has to be so many millions of years old. It's bullshit, right? They just throw it out. Whereas with catastrophism, it doesn't have to be that many millions of years old.
Right, because there can be vast changes that do things like create entire mountain chains in a matter of weeks.
So it definitely is going to be a catastrophe for the entire uniformitarian idea.
That's right. No pun intended.
And the guy, we were talking about this the other day, the two leading scientists in the beginning that were doing their work that have like the Harry Potter names.
Yeah, what is the deal with they're strangely appropriate names, right? And I've looked at this phenomenon before. There's an actual word for it. It has to do.
I call them Harry Potter names.
Yeah, they're Harry Potter names. Where like the guy who wrote the history book has this name that's appropriate for history book. Well, the guy that does the study of magical creatures is Newt Scamander. Whatever. Yeah. So the two leading scientists on this Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, one of them's named Firestone, and the other one's named West. So it's Firestone and West are doing this, and it's like, how did this happen?
This
they're talking about a ball of fire, a rock that came out from space and landed in the West. How is this possible? What is going on here? Clearly, there's some vibrations happening. I started to think about this in terms of the elastic universe. Like, is that why these things happen? Because frequency is going on.
I have no idea.
I mean, come on. Like, if everything is really frequency of some kind, all information is being propagated as frequency.
This kind of goes back to you've talked to me about this idea in a different way before.
Oh, that the universe is really about information?
Yeah.
And like, that's the only way that this can happen. Like, how does a guy named Firestone be the lead guy on like fucking burning rock from space causing the, and there's a whole collection of these of like strangely appropriate names. Like, you can't plan this. You can't possibly plan it, right? Like, I'm sure Firestone didn't think, I need to be a meteor geologist. And I'm going to be the guy that comes up with the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. It's like, what? And he's like, I need that guy West because it's over here in the West, right? Hey, West, come work with me. We're Firestone West.
So anyway, back to the burn papers. We can't solve that mystery.
Wait, what? No, we could poke at it though. I'm just poking
at the fire.
Yeah. So go ahead. Back to the burn papers.
Well, you've done a little bit more research than me on this, but the burn papers are basically they were released in February of 2018. They were published in the Journal of Geology.
Yeah,
I believe Chicago something or other.
Very highly respected Journal of Geology.
Yeah. So this is the newest, I guess, publication by this group, and they're in the papers. They're citing all of these previous studies that, and there's been a lot of debate. Okay. There's been a lot of refutations and all this kind of stuff. And they've responded to pretty much everyone.
Yeah. And destroyed them pretty much.
And so it's pretty solid. But this most recent thing is basically about this idea of these firestorms, basically, right?
Yeah, global firestorms started by the impacts.
What Russ was talking about, this heat signature it's so freaking hot. It just spontaneous combustion of everything, or not spontaneous, but
it's
instantaneous conflagration.
Yeah, and then there's
of the like massive area. I can't remember what the
biomass.
Yeah, the biomass. Like they were saying, it was like
10%.
Some massive area. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, 100 like millions of square miles, basically. Of like you take millions of square miles of lush land and then just burn every organic thing on it. Okay, and this is caused both by the initial heat flash from the impacts themselves, but then also the shock wave, but then also the ejecta. There are these enormous ejectus droplets, and they call them droplets, but you have to think of these things in terms of like, we're talking, some of them can be 100 feet across, and they're a mix of like molten rock, and they're like kind of like a lava and like water vapor, like extremely hot steam, water vapor contained in there and everything like that. And these things some of them are sent into ballistic orbits because the impact is so enormous that these molten droplets go flying up, way up high into the atmosphere, miles and miles up there, and then they arc back down like a ballistic missile, and then they land somewhere, and it's molten metal, molten metals and rock, and it lands in the middle of a forest and sets the entire thing on fire. Another interesting thing caused by ejecta droplets, because this hit the Younger Dryas impact happened on top of the North American ice sheet, which was enormous and came all the way down to, I think the farthest south it came to was what was it? I was just naming the town. It's in Minnesota.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, but it was 2 miles thick, and these impactors landed in the ice sheet.
10 million square kilometers.
Yeah.
Of the Earth's surface, or roughly 9% of the Earth's biomass, considerably more than for the KPG impact, which I don't know what that is.
That's the KPG. I think that's the KT event, the one that killed the dinosaurs. Maybe.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I know that was a bigger impactor and was a much more deadly event.
So for whatever reason, this one caused this massive burning. And
the KT event took place in the Gulf, so instead of throwing fire everywhere, it threw water. So it probably didn't start massive fires.
So it says, so basically, the existing evidence indicates that the YDB impact event caused an anomalously large episode of biomass burning, resulting in extensive atmospheric soot dust loading that triggered an impact winter. This in turn triggered abrupt YD cooling and other climate changes reinforced by climatic feedback mechanisms, including Arctic sea ice expansion, rerouting of North American continental runoff, and subsequent ocean circulation changes.
Right, and vast changes in albedo too. Like the other,
Yeah.
so you once you got enough ice on the ground, it starts to reflect so much sunlight that it stays cold because the sunlight just goes back out into space.
And this this is 12,000.
Yeah, it's not that long ago.
600 years ago or something.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, this is last year or yesterday.
12,800 or something.
Yeah, it's 11,500 BC is basically the time period or whatever, and this encompasses a 1,000-year long anomalous period at the end of the last glaciation.
Yeah, so okay, it's to be exact, 12,835 to 12,735 calibrated before present.
Yeah.
And so we have Göbekli Tepe, which is like
right there
in that period. So there's, I think I was reading earlier, they're analyzing some depiction on one of the pillars of Göbekli Tepe now, and thinking that it actually represents this. There's like multiple things that look like, they're trying to show a depiction of the actual impacts, like all these multiple things coming down and hitting.
Right, and they're showing. And
I didn't see any pictures. I just read this. Analysis.
The arrangement of the animals on that on that stele. If you look at those animals in terms of those are zodiacal constellations and shit, then you see that the arrangement of them shows you like a clock that it was 12,000 whatever BC, and then you have all these streaks coming down from the sky. They're basically saying. That's why we got
nailed.
Yeah, that's why I thought Göbekli Tepe kind of looks like a memorial to me.
Right, and that's kind of what the idea is, that it was. And then 2,000 years later, apparently, somebody decided to bury it to preserve it. It's like
because we.
So I wonder if so you take this idea that there was, like Graham Hancock's idea that there was, however advanced civilization before this cataclysm. The cataclysm happens, and some of the survivors from it go and mingle with a sort of, butt flap tribe of hunter-gatherer types
in a place that was sort of protected from the
and his point is that, like, where would you go if you're a city slicker, you don't know how to survive and shit, and then some crazy cataclysm happens, like you go out you happen to be near some
some basin jungle where there's indigenous people there.
Right. That they know how to survive.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're basically friendly, and you're like, okay, I'm going to die, but they know how to survive and get food. But I have all this knowledge that I can pass on.
Help them, but not, you can help them in certain ways. And so the idea is that these two different cultures sort of mingled together, and they built Göbekli Tepe, right? And as a memorial to try to tell this story. Okay. This had to have been some brilliant motherfuckers that were like, we need to tell this story in a way that's going to last. And then it's interesting that, like, the agriculture and everything develops around there.
Right.
But it's like looking 2,000 years from there, maybe, those stories or the population that had lived is still in decline.
Yeah.
And
and then you have the second, because the end of the Younger Dryas period, the impact they're talking about starts the Younger Dryas,
right?
Because there's this long decline of the ice age, and the things are melting slowly and everything, and then there's this sudden impact event that starts all these fires, puts all this soot in the air, and basically causes a global cooling event that slams us back into the depths of the ice age for 1,000 years. That's called the Younger Dryas.
Right.
It's an anomalous climactic event in the very recent past that no one has been able to understand until this climate research group has been working on this.
Right. What I was getting to was that 2,000 years after they built Göbekli Tepe, apparently they buried it on purpose. Mm. So it was. I'm thinking that, like, it was again discovered by some people who also had maybe an oral tradition or somehow connected to the idea, and they're like, dude, we need to preserve this because we're fucking dying out, and this thing's going to be lost.
And that's what I was getting at, is that at the end of the Younger Dryas, that was caused by this impact. There was something else that happened that ended it abruptly.
That's right. Yeah.
So like they went through another cataclysmic event, and then those survivors stumble upon Göbekli Tepe, and they're like, "Holy shit, this tells the story.
Yeah.
Let's fucking preserve it." You know,
Yeah,
maybe
that's wild.
Yeah.
But with that, we're gonna take our last break here
Yep.
and come back and keep wondering what the fuck happened.
Göbekli snakes.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, on top of the dusty bones of an ancient seabed, utterly wiped out.
Arthur.
Yes, oh Lord.
I want you to seek the Grail.
Okay, dude. I just had a fucking... Okay. Anunnaki. Those who from the heavens to earth came.
Yeah, of course, the shining ones.
Yeah. So it's a fucking tale. What did they do? They came down here and they changed the landscape. They built levees and dams and all this kind of shit.
Changed our DNA. Remember the shit we were going through with the Grail stuff?
Yeah.
How they have the weird platinum group metals that lock onto our DNA, make them into superconductors and shit.
So they're personified, basically space rocks that came down here and fucked everything up and flipped over the land and created mountain ranges and all this kind of shit. The Anunnaki, those from heavens to earth came. And now back to the name synchronicity or whatever we're calling it. The guy who discovered this comet that is in the Taurid meteor stream that is one of Russ is going to talk about this in a second. Comet Encke.
Yeah.
Spelled Encke.
Right.
Was discovered or spotted by multiple people throughout, starting in 1744, and on multiple times it was seen, but finally an observation of the comet in 1818 by Johann Franz Encke. He finally determined its orbit, and that is where the comet got its name, and this is now the one
in the Taurid stream.
In the Taurid stream that is being looked at as possibly
the progenitor of the comet swarms, the debris fields that we're running through.
Yep.
Firestone, West, and Encke. God damn it.
Yeah, those who from the heavens to earth came.
Yeah, the bright shining ones.
That's fucking...
Of course. Of course. This is why they were given wings. So what are the Watchers then?
I don't know, but I'm gonna have to go back and look at this whole fucking story again.
Yeah,
with
the
these
Watchers,
eyes, like...
maybe the Shimsu Hor, the followers of the Sons of Horus. They were the astronomers, like fucking looking for the
yes.
They were the Watchers, bro, watching space. Yeah, holy shit.
They brought these three rivers together, right? The Tigris, the Euphrates, and the
I can't remember the other one.
Thames. The Nile.
The Nile. The Tigris, Euphrates, and the Thames.
Sorry, but yeah, the Fertile Crescent.
Yeah, the Fertile Crescent, Eden.
Anyway, yeah, whoa, fucking just blew my own mind.
Yeah.
During the intro.
Wow.
To the last segment.
Wow.
So what was this? So the Comet Research Group just released another paper.
So
like right now.
It was a Napier. It was Napier.
Or Napier.
Or no, I'm sorry. There was a okay. Let me check to make sure. Who is the one that released this?
I will not talk about sources when I don't know.
Napier. I don't know what they are either. Napier responded to this to a question. Okay, so
no, but this. Yeah. Oh, is that what this whole thing is?
Yeah. Okay, so this is a Napier paper. Paleolithic extinctions and the Taurid complex. This is the paper that he wrote. Okay. So I think what's happening here is the boss, Boslow, this skirpderp, right? The guy from the Sandia National Laboratories that's been wasting his time trying to skirpderp the younger dryas impact hypothesis. We talked about him in the last segment or whatever. That he's he's come out saying that like comet swarms are ridiculous. They're, they don't last very long, and like ones that are the size of Earth are stupid. Like they're very short lived, and they've got this direct quote here.
Here, let me just move that mic in front of your face.
Yeah,
while you're reading,
it says,
"Whoa, there we go."
Yeah, so this is the quote from the Boz. The YDB impact hypothesis of Firestone et al. Is so extremely improbable that it can be considered statistically impossible in addition to being physically impossible. Comets make up only about 1% of the population of Earth-crossing objects. Broken comets are a vanishingly small fraction and only exist as Earth-sized clusters for a very short period of time. That was his comment, and that's his response to the burn. Or wait, no, I guess he said that on... He said that in... wait, let's see. He said that in Denver in 2010. Okay, so this is a while back, but they're responding to it. So they post this paper from Napier that is basically saying Paleolithic extinctions and the Taurid complex. The abstract is intersections with the debris of a large 50 to 100 kilometer short period comet during the Upper Paleolithic provides a satisfactory explanation for the catastrophe of celestial origin, which has been postulated to have occurred around 12,900 BP, which is before present, and which presaged a return to Ice Age conditions of duration approximately 1,300 years. The Taurid complex appears to be the debris of this erstwhile comet. It includes at least 19 of the brightest near-Earth objects. Sub-kilometer bodies and meteor streams may present the greatest regional impact hazard on timescales of human concern. That's the abstract of the paper. So below that, they're asking Bill Napier to respond to this comment by Boslow. Okay, so Napier is like, this is what he does. He's like a cometary scientist. Like this is all he studies: comet motions and bodies, and like what do they do, and what is their lifetime, their span, like what happens. And he's the one that basically was enabling the research that Carlson did on the Grail theory about, because he was basically showing that all comets break up into these long chains. Yeah. Right. Which facilitates you seeing the symbolism of the Grail because of all the candles. Like that was a part that was confusing people. Like all these like candles, these lights in the sky. Well, if you know that the in the period of comet life, when they move into the gravitational influence of the bigger planets, they start to spread out in these streams of smaller objects. Then you have the procession of candles in the sky. Wow. Right? So this guy was one of the ones that was showing that this is not abnormal, but this is actually always what happens. And this also explains the weird, like if you go, you can look up crater chains, like you'll go on Google Images and look up crater chains, and there's these weird, like, on the moon, like all these craters are like in a line. And they're very similar size, not all the same size, but they're in a perfect line. But that's an impact of a comet chain, where like just like with Shoemaker-Levy, when it impacted Jupiter, it broke up into like 20 pieces, and then they were like like one after the other. So if that impacted a solid object like the moon or Mars, you end up with this string of circles on the surface, right? And those were a mystery for a long time. But this guy, Bill Napier, has basically been instrumental in saying like, no, this is common. The comets are very fragile. Okay, they form way out there in the Oort cloud or in the Kuiper belt where the gravitational influences are minuscule. Yeah. So there's some heavy nucleus object of the comet itself that takes over tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of years to very slowly attract stuff to it because its gravity is infinitesimal. It's all fluff, right. So they kind of stick to each other, but it's sticking in the way that like two ice cubes will stick together. If you like bang it on something, they come apart, right? Yeah. So as soon as they move into a region of warmer stuff, like the inner solar system and heavier gravity influences, they just start to come apart. Yeah, and they squashed. And they spread out into these long, they call them comet streams, right? Yeah. So, and this is what makes it so much more dangerous, because when you're just thinking about comets being large objects that are coming in and they're kind of like swinging around and going back out, that's one thing, because you just got one object you got to dodge. But if that thing comes in and turns into this like million-mile long like stream of smaller objects that are still deadly, especially if they're like, that's much more likely that we'll hit that because it's millions of miles long.
Buckshot.
Yeah. And well, it's like a machine gun, not buckshot. It's like,
true.
You know what I mean? A lot of it will be dust and everything like that. But this is what's fascinating. If you look at the Great Chicago Fire.
Machine
Shut up, Kyle. I'm trying to talk right now. Shotgun machine gun shot. cannonballs. If you look at the Great Chicago Fire, I've been thinking about this in terms of celestial events. The Great Chicago Fire is highly anomalous in the sense that, like, first of all, no one knows how it got started. There's the story of like Miss O'Leary's cow, right? They put out the story like this cow kicked over a lantern and it just burned down all of Chicago, right? I think that's the fucking story.
Fucking uniformitarian.
But if you, one cow and one lantern at a time. But if you look at the story, the eyewitness accounts, and this is the important stuff. Like you know, in order to try to really understand what happened, you have to find out what people said happened. You know, and of course, when you start talking about the things that they said happened, some of them are so strange that people are like, well, their whole city was on fire and they probably thought it was the end of the world. And so, of course, they thought it was coming from the sky. And so, of course, they thought, you know, but they're just making this shit up because they don't like the implications, right? It's the same deal where it's like, I don't like the implications of all that shit you just said. So I'm going to explain to you how it's mass hysteria, right?
Yeah.
With no supporting evidence whatsoever, except that they don't like the conclusions it comes to. So when you look at the Chicago fire and the witness accounts, there were fireballs coming out of the sky. Okay. There were enormous, like, they called them heat blankets. Like, you're out in the woods away from the fire and you're watching the city burn or whatever. And then suddenly there's just like this feeling and it like pushes everybody down to the ground. And it's suddenly like 120 degrees. Like, it's just heat coming down from the sky and impacting people. And like, not only did Chicago burn, but like all these outlier villages were burned flat. I mean, like in some of them, every man, woman, and child was killed. Like they basically disappeared in terms of buildings and population. They just were wiped off the face of the earth and out of history because it's kind of like the plagues, like where, you know, a plague will just, during the plague years in Europe, these like totally isolated, like German villages in the middle of nowhere amongst the mountains and shit would just like every person there would die of plague when there was no vector for it to have been transmitted to them. They're in the middle of nowhere and no one's going there carrying the plague to them and they just all fucking die.
Yeah.
And the village just disappears from history until eventually, like hundreds of years later, somebody goes out there and finds it. All the buildings are still there, but the people are just dead. And you eventually find out, wow, they all died from the plague. Everybody. So that the Chicago fires like that, like not just Chicago, but enormous areas of the Midwest were set ablaze by some anomalous event that seemed to be coming out of the sky. It isn't. It's, you know, people have said like, well, it couldn't have been meteors or whatever because there's no craters. But if it was dust from a comet, just enormous amounts of tiny dust particles that were still coming in with the same reentry speed, it would just appear on the surface as heat.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be burning, you know, and there might have been small rocks that show up as fireballs coming out of the sky and setting things on fire, but really it would just be like you run through the tail of a comet and it's just the dust comes down to the surface being 1200 degrees Celsius.
Yeah. Even if it starts out as like larger particles and it's basically dust.
If there's enough of it
by the time that it gets down to the surface, but it's just fire.
Right. It's just incredibly hot, tiny particles. And so like
it's basically air on fire.
So think about that. That's the Great Chicago Fire. This is a couple hundred years ago. Yeah. And it's in the right time period. In other words, it's in the right time of year to have been a torrid dust stream.
In June or whatever?
Yeah, or the other one. Because
it's twice a year.
There's the first one is in like June or whatever, and then the other one's in October. Like it's the Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
So Napier has been basically like providing all the data, the complex data and evidence to show that comets have this life. We talked about this in the Grail story, that they have this 5 period, or whatever you call it, like 5 different stages of life of a comet. Yeah. There's formation, right? And then there's activation, which is where they get pulled out of their very tenuous orbit and start falling inwards. Then there's disintegration, and then there's something else, and then amalgamation, which is when they impact, right? So he's basically showing like this is what they all do. This is not uncommon. Yeah. This is common. So let's get back to
I was trying to report that this is like a brand new story that just came in, and it's not. It's just something that apparently Randall Carlson just posted on his
website. Because it's relevant, right? Because it's basically talking about that Boslow is one of the main critics of the YDV hypothesis. So basically, what's happening here is they put Boslow's quote, and then they said, Napier, can you respond to this? Can you like give us a short kick this guy's ass really quickly with ninja skills? So and
he does it cataclysmically.
He does it like
fucking wipes him out in a matter of seconds.
That's right. completely rearranges his face.
Wrecked.
Yeah, wrecked.
R-E-K-T.
Wrecked. Okay. He says, it's true that comets currently make up a minority of the population of Earth-crossing objects. 1% is extreme, but let that pass. But that's only at the 1 kilometer level or thereabouts. As you go to larger objects, the balance shifts profoundly. For example, there are no 10-kilometer asteroids currently in Earth-crossing orbits. But we do have large cometary Earth crossers such as Halley's Comet at 11 kilometers and Swift-Tuttle at 27 kilometers and so on. Asteroids of 10 kilometers or more can't be shifted out of the main belt at a sufficient rate to account for the large terrestrial impact craters because the transfer rate is an order of magnitude too slow. The action lies with big comets. So, large populations of them have been discovered on the fringes of the planetary system in recent years thanks to deep, wide-angle surveys. Their number is still uncertain, and their orbital dynamics is still being worked out, but it is recognized that from time to time, rare giant comets will feed into short-period orbits from these populations, weaving between the giant planets in unstable orbits which may lead to their entering our neighborhood on relatively short timescales. They do this, for the most part, by feeding through the Jupiter family of comets, that is short-period comets whose orbits are strongly influenced by that giant planet. Chiron, for example, which is over 200 kilometers in diameter and orbiting beyond Saturn, has probably dipped in and out of our neighborhood several times in the past. The half-life for doing so is about 0.2 million years, which is 200,000 years, each episode lasting a few thousand years. It probably has several thousand times the mass of the entire near-Earth asteroid system.
Jeez.
There are several known bodies in this size range and similarly unstable objects with similarly unstable orbits, and the sample is likely incomplete. Large-scale orbital computations have shown that they have the propensity to become Earth crossers on timescales on the order of just a million years. So it follows from this that a giant comet residing in a short-period Earth-crossing orbit is not uncommon on geological timescales, and there is nothing anomalous about an erstwhile giant comet having been around, say, over the last 100,000 years. This is all by the way of background because we know that, in fact, 2 such comets have indeed been around in the recent past. One is the progenitor of the Kreutz Sungrazers, which was probably 100 kilometers across and began to break up about 1,700 years ago. So that one's recent.
Wow.
The other is the progenitor of Comet Encke and the Taurids, which was probably of similar size but much greater age, at least 20,000 or perhaps up to 100,000 years. Kreutz was high inclination and its debris never came our way, but Encke is in the ecliptic and we still are immersed in its debris, the Taurid complex. Which leads to the question, what do we expect from a 100 to 200 kilometer comet in a short period Earth-crossing ecliptic orbit? And then he quotes Boslow again right here. Broken comets are a vanishingly small fraction and only exist as Earth-sized clusters for a very short period of time. And Napier says, this one sentence contains 2 profound misconceptions. First, hierarchic disintegration is now generally recognized as the major route whereby comets die. It's a common process. Second, Earth-sized clusters have nothing to do with it. We are dealing with concentrations of fragments having, say, 10,000 times the size of a cross-section area of the Earth. For a 100-kilometer comet to undergo disintegration in our neighborhood gives us a hugely enhanced impact hazard. Fragments totaling even 1,000th of the size of Chiron would have a mass of, and he gives a mass number here, passage through such a debris field would yield a bunch of energy, material impacting on the Earth. This is likely to be in the form of dust, pebbles, all the way up to super Tunguska objects. Okay, the overall energy amounts to something like 5,000 Tunguskas, striking a hemisphere of the Earth over a period of a few hours as we pass through. What are the odds that we would in fact pass through such debris in the course of the short period giant comet's disintegration? This communication is already quite long enough, but detailed numerical modeling based on lifetimes, drift, shepherding, resonances, and the like reveal that 1 or 2 such encounters are reasonably probable events over the active lifetime of the Taurid progenitor. So in other words, we're going to at least hit it twice while it's there.
Yeah.
Right. So in a nutshell, Mark Boslow's commentary his commentary model is irrelevant. It has nothing to do with the actual circumstances which prevailed in our environment over the Holocene and earlier. It takes no account and indeed shows no awareness of modern developments in commentary dynamics. Any competent referee
would reject it. I could say more, but perhaps that's enough to be going on with. Best regards, Bill. Wrecked. So basically, like that just outlines the whole problem right there. Like this is what. So when NASA's like, we found like 90% of all Earth crossing objects, like they don't even know what they're talking about. They're not talking about the torrid stream because they don't view it as that yet. They're not looking at that as a, the torrid complex is they view that as a sort of a static thing of like small meteors. That's not what it is. Somewhere out there is enormous, gigantic pieces of comet still.
Yeah.
And they're probably surrounded by this wispy shit of smaller things going on.
Which makes it hard to see them.
Right. And it goes, and they have very low albedo because they tend to be covered in like bituminous tar and stuff like that. Like,
yeah.
They tend to be covered in this strange, like proto-organic shit that makes them black and non-reflective.
Yeah.
Which is like cheating or something. You can't go out there in space dressed in black.
Bullets.
Damn it. Yeah.
Stealth buckshot machine guns.
Yeah. The only time we can see them is when they get close enough to the sun, they start outgassing.
Yeah.
And that, of course, makes the giant trail, which is behind all the legends of dragons in the sky, basically.
So let's see what this. I'll go back to this thing with Comet Henge. So yeah, it was first seen in 1744. Then seen again in 1786, and then seen again in 1795, and then again in 1805.
But the guy that finally was able to figure out its orbital mechanics is the one that named it after it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then 1818.
Yeah.
And so, so in 1744, it was. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. That's wrong. That was when the guy was born. The first time I think it was 1786.
Okay.
And he was searching for comets. This guy, I can't even pronounce it. Pierre McCain. It had a slight tail, so it was it was like getting close.
And had a higher albedo, so we could see it better. Yeah.
Yeah. So from 1786.
So this is partly what it appears, at least, partly what the Mayan calendar thing was pointing at. Like, we are entering a period where we are re-entering the hazardous part of the torrid stream.
Yeah.
And that kind of began in the whole 2012 deal. Like, that's where it started. Like, so they weren't saying it's the end of the world, but, it's kind of the end of the world. Like, because it was the end of the world last time. Like, sort of. That's what's strange about it, is that, like, it also coincides with the apparent crossing of the sun through the galactic rift or whatever.
The dark rift, yeah.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is that may be what causes activation. In other words, the period of the comet's life where it gets yanked out of its very tenuous orbit way the fuck out there and begins the long fall into the inner system. Because that alignment may cause some enough perturbations of gravity to kind of knock one of those big boys out of there, and like 50,000 years from now,
Yeah, maybe, but and I could be wrong about this, but that alignment is really based on our position.
Yeah, but it's nonetheless, it's an alignment, of bodies towards the center of the galaxy, which is like you got the sun, you got the galaxy center and the sun there. And that's enough of a gravitic alignment to pull one of these comets out of these incredibly tenuous orbits.
I'm just thinking that whatever that comet's orbit is, that galactic alignment's not going to happen at the same time it's happening for our perspective from Earth, looking at the sun.
Right. No, it would need to be in alignment with us, like back there somewhere. Like, so if the Earth is here and we're looking at the sun and the galaxy's behind that, and behind us is the comet, and they may be pulled just enough.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Especially if the moon gets in there too and stuff.
Well, there was that whole thing not too long ago. I mean, it was before 2012, but there was the whole like planetary alignment freak out.
Pretty big alignment. And see, it's events like that probably. I mean, really, and if you look at occult texts and other,
I could see that definitely being,
because they all line up, and then suddenly you have this sort of a gravity train, right? And if there happens to be a big comet way out there in the Oort cloud that's also in the alignment, it gets pulled just enough to where it starts this long fall, and it'll take 50,000 years to get here, but it's just interesting to me that like we're re-entering the torrid stream that caused the last major cataclysm at the same time that we're also having the event that may be causing an activation of the next thing that's going to be causing the next cataclysms.
That would be really crazy.
Frequencies. It's fucking sound waves everywhere. Damn it.
That's badass, man.
Basically, we're all going to die. That's what I'm saying.
And hopefully, like, the people that are figuring out we're all going to die are going to be proven right soon so that we can figure out how to not die.
Yeah. So we can go to space and get lost and die.
Yeah. So basically, the next time you meet somebody that's like, oh, it's man fucking up the globe, just be like, you're going to kill us all with your fucking dogma.
Yeah. Well, what are they doing? They were eating, drinking, and getting married right before the flood.
Yeah, they were just going about their business.
They forgot to say, and freaking out about climate change right before the flood. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be it.
That's another one of those things where, like, you know, you're basically like, yeah, you're right, but you're wrong.
Yeah. You got a good point, but it's wrong. It's good. You're kind of right about that. Like, we shouldn't be doing that, but it doesn't matter because we're all going to die.
Serpent in the sky.
Serpent in the sky. Run up to the serpent in the sky. Isn't that how that goes? Is that right?
I don't know.
It's the Spirit in the Sky song.
Yeah.
Going up to the Spirit in the sky. Right?
Yeah.
Something when I die.
I don't know that song.
Come on, man. Help me out here. All right. So that's going to be it for this week. We have lots of interesting topics coming up. We got the Oopart song, which you guys are totally going to love. It's going to be fucking awesome.
Yeah. We're thinking about throwing a party.
Yeah.
For the Pleiades meteor shower.
That's right. All the snake skins.
Yep. Everybody wear your snake skins and show up in your Oopart suit.
That's right. Oopart suit, which we'll explain. Oopart suit with the Oopart song. But that's going to be it for this week. Like I said, thank you guys very much for listening. You can get a hold of us through email at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. You can go to the blog at brothersoftheserpent.blogspot.com. You can comment there. You can check the older shows. We got a whole list of them there, all free for download. And if you guys want, you can give us some upvotes, some updates on iTunes. And look, I don't want to push this or whatever, but like this is the best way for people who completely don't know about us to take a chance on listening to the show. Like if they see some good reviews in there or whatever, that's what makes them do it. This is a known thing. So like it would really help us out if you guys jump onto iTunes and just say, yeah, it's worth checking. It's worth taking a look at it. So,
and hey, if you're a fellow Snake Bro and you have a business and you provide a badass product that you would want to share with other Snake Bros,
let us know. We will totally make Snake Bro commercials for you.
Yeah. We'll advertise some commercials. We'll work out a deal.
Hell yeah. That would be really cool. So I think that's it. Right? For episode 39.
Yeah.
Cut. Good night, Adamu.
Look out for Inky.